My wife became a doctor and asked for divorce the same day. 3 years later, she showed up at my office begging for help. What she didn't know was that I had become the head of the hospital where she now desperately needed a job. Subscribe to the channel and like the video to see more stories like this. My wife became a doctor and asked for divorce the same day. 3 years later, she showed up at my office begging for help. What she didn't know was that I had become the head of the hospital where she now desperately needed a job. I'm David Mitchell, 34 years old, and the memory of that graduation day still burns in my mind like it happened yesterday. I was sitting in the audience of Pacific Medical School's auditorium, clutching a bouquet of white roses, her favorite flowers. 8 years of marriage, 6 years of supporting her through medical school, working double shifts as a nurse to pay for her tuition, her books, her study materials, everything she needed to achieve her dream of becoming a doctor. When they called her name, Dr. Rachel Mitchell, I stood up and clapped so hard my hands hurt. She walked across that stage in her white coat, diploma in hand, and I felt proud in a way I'd never felt before. This was our victory, our achievement together, or so I thought. The celebration dinner that night was at Marcello's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown that cost more than I made in a week. Rachel insisted we needed to celebrate properly. She wore a red dress I'd never seen before, designer heels that must have cost hundreds of dollars. I wondered when she'd bought them, but I pushed the thought away. She deserved to celebrate. We were halfway through our appetizers when she set down her wine glass and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Cold, distant, like she was looking at a stranger. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice flat and clinical, the same tone she used when discussing patient symptoms during her rotations. I smiled, thinking she wanted to discuss her residency options. "Of course. What's on your mind?" She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a manila envelope, sliding it across the white tablecloth toward me. "I want a divorce." The words didn't register at first. I stared at the envelope, then at her face, searching for any sign that this was some kind of joke. "What?" "I've already spoken to a lawyer. The papers are inside. I need you to sign them." Her manicured nails, freshly done in deep burgundy, tapped against the table. "I'll be starting my residency at Presbyterian Hospital next month. Dr. Harrison has offered me a position in cardiology." Dr. Harrison. I knew that name. Dr. Marcus Harrison, the attending physician Rachel had been working with during her final rotations. 42 years old, divorced, department head of cardiology. She'd mentioned him often during the past 6 months, always with a certain tone in her voice that I'd chosen to ignore. "Rachel, I don't understand. We just celebrated your graduation. I thought we were happy." She took another sip of wine, perfectly composed. "David, you're a nurse. A good nurse, but still just a nurse. I'm going to be a cardiologist. We're not on the same level anymore. Dr. Harrison understands my ambitions, my career goals. He's already published 3 papers this year. We're collaborating on research that could change cardiac treatment protocols." The knife twisted deeper with every word. "I supported you through everything. I worked extra shifts. I took care of the house. I helped you study. I sacrificed my own career advancement so you could focus on medical school. And I appreciate that," she said with the warmth of someone thanking a waiter for bringing water. "You were very helpful, but I need a partner who can match my professional status, someone who moves in the same circles, who understands the pressures of being a physician." Dr. Harrison and I have been seeing each other for 3 months now. He's already introduced me to the head of Presbyterian's research department. 3 months. While I was working 16-hour shifts to pay our rent, she was betraying me with her attending physician. While I was buying her favorite takeout and leaving encouraging notes in her study materials, she was planning her exit strategy. "So this whole time, you were just using me?" My voice cracked despite my attempt to stay composed. Rachel sighed, as if I was being unnecessarily dramatic. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You served your purpose. I couldn't have gotten through medical school without financial support, that's true. But now I'm moving into a different phase of my life. I need someone who can elevate my career, not hold it back." The waiter approached with our entrees, read the tension at our table, and quickly retreated. Around us, other couples laughed and clinked glasses, celebrating anniversaries and promotions, oblivious to the fact that my 8-year marriage was being terminated like a failed clinical trial. "I gave you everything," I said quietly, staring at the envelope. "My time, my money, my support, my love. And I gave you 8 years of my life," she countered. "Consider us even. Look, David, in the medical world, image matters. Showing up to hospital functions with a nurse as my spouse sends the wrong message. Dr. Harrison is respected, published, influential. He can help me build my career in ways you never could." She pulled out her phone and showed me a picture. Her and Dr. Harrison at what looked like a medical conference, his arm around her waist, both of them in formal attire. The photo was dated 2 months ago. "I've already moved most of my things to Marcus's condo. It's in the financial district, much more appropriate for my new position. You can keep the apartment. I've paid through the end of this month as a courtesy." A courtesy. 8 years of marriage, and she was giving me 1 month's rent as a severance package. "The division of assets is outlined in the papers," she continued, businesslike and efficient. "Since you were the primary earner during my medical school years, I'm not seeking alimony. I've already taken my personal belongings and half of our savings account. The rest is yours. Our savings account. The money I'd carefully set aside, planning for our future. Maybe a house one day. Children, perhaps." She'd taken half without even discussing it. "I need your signature by next week. I want this finalized before I start my residency. Marcus thinks it's better to begin my new position with a clean slate." Marcus thinks. She'd already given him more consideration than she'd given me in months. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The divorce papers were professionally prepared, every detail outlined with legal precision. She'd planned this carefully, probably while I was working those extra shifts at the hospital to pay for the very graduation we'd just celebrated. "I'm not gonna fight you," I said finally, my voice hollow. follow. If this is what you want. Relief flashed across her face, quickly masked. It's better this way, David. We both know you were never really at my level intellectually. I need someone who can challenge me, engage with me about complex medical theories. You're good at patient care, the emotional support aspect of medicine, but you don't have the analytical mind for research and advancement. Each word was a calculated strike designed to make me feel small, insignificant, less than. And in that moment, sitting in that expensive restaurant with divorce papers in my hands and my wife's contempt written across her face, I felt exactly as she intended. But something else stirred beneath the pain and humiliation. A cold, hard determination. She'd used me, discarded me, and now expected me to quietly disappear into the background of her successful new life. I pulled out my pen and signed the papers right there at the table, my signature steady, despite the rage building in my chest. Done. Rachel smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her all evening. Thank you for being reasonable about this. I'll have my lawyer file these tomorrow. She stood up, smoothing down her expensive dress. I'm meeting Marcus for drinks at the Edison Club. You can take care of the bill here. Consider it your final contribution to my success. She walked away without looking back, her heels clicking against the marble floor, leaving me alone at a table set for two with a bouquet of white roses that would never be given and a dinner bill that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring at the signed divorce papers, feeling the weight of betrayal settle into my bones. Other diners glanced at me with curiosity and pity, probably wondering why someone was sitting alone at a romantic restaurant looking like their world had just ended. Because it had. 8 years of my life gone, thousands of dollars in savings depleted, my future plans destroyed. Also, Rachel could climb her career ladder with someone she deemed more worthy of standing beside her. The waiter eventually approached cautiously. Sir, is everything all right? Can I get you anything else? I looked up at him, this young man probably working his way through college, and I saw myself reflected in his concerned expression. Just the check, please. As I paid the bill with money I'd earned during those grueling double shifts, something crystallized inside. Rachel thought she'd won. She thought she'd gotten everything she wanted, traded up for a better model, left me behind as a footnote in her success story. But she'd made one critical miscalculation. She'd assumed I would stay where I was, remain the supportive nurse in the background, never advancing, never growing, never becoming anything more than what I was in her eyes. She had no idea what I was capable of when I wasn't spending all my time and energy supporting someone else's dreams. I left the restaurant that night with empty hands and a broken heart, but with something else too. A burning determination to prove that her assessment of me, her dismissal of my worth and potential, was the biggest mistake she would ever make. 3 years, I thought as I walked alone through the city streets. Give me 3 years, Rachel, and then we'll see who's really on what level. The apartment felt different when I returned that night. Empty, even though all my belongings were still there. Rachel had taken her things while I was at work over the past few weeks, I realized. The closet had gaps where her clothes used to hang. Her medical textbooks were gone from the shelves. The framed photos of us had disappeared from the walls, leaving behind rectangular shadows on the paint. I sat on the couch in the dark, still wearing my work scrubs, and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back at the restaurant. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected, not just because she'd left me, but because of how easily she'd dismissed everything we built together. 8 years reduced to a transaction, my love and support quantified as payment rendered for services received. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend and co-worker, James. He was a fellow nurse in the emergency department, someone who'd been there through the worst shifts and the best moments of my career. Heard about Rachel. I'm so sorry, man. Wanna grab a beer? Word traveled fast in the medical community. Someone must have seen us at the restaurant, or maybe Rachel had already started spreading the news that she'd upgraded from a nurse to a cardiologist. I texted back that I needed time alone, but I appreciated him reaching out. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and a clearer head. The emotional storm had passed, leaving behind something harder and more focused. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, staring at the empty screen. For 6 years, I'd put my own career advancement on hold. I'd stayed in the same position as an emergency room nurse, taking extra shifts for money instead of using that time to pursue additional certifications or education. I'd been content to be the support system, the foundation that allowed Rachel to reach for her dreams. That ended now. I opened my email and started researching nurse practitioner programs, hospital administration courses, healthcare management degrees. Options I'd considered years ago, but shelved because Rachel needed me to focus on earning money, not spending it on my own education. One program caught my attention. St. Vincent's Hospital offered an accelerated master's in healthcare administration with a specialization in hospital operations. The program was intensive, 18 months of coursework and practical application, but it led directly to administrative positions within the hospital system. Even better, St. Vincent's offered full scholarships to employees who committed to working for them after graduation. I'd heard about this program before. It was competitive, only accepting 10 candidates per year from a pool of hundreds of applicants. But as I read through the requirements, I realized I was qualified, more than qualified. My 6 years in the emergency department had given me experience with hospital operations, patient care coordination, and crisis management. My bachelor's degree in nursing was solid. My performance reviews were excellent, and I had letters of recommendation from attending physicians who respected my work. The application deadline was in 2 weeks. I started writing that same morning. Over the next 14 days, I threw myself into that application with the same intensity Rachel had shown during medical school. I requested letters of recommendation from Dr. Patricia Hayes, the emergency department director who'd mentored me. I wrote and rewrote my personal personal statement, explaining my vision for improving hospital efficiency and patient care. I gathered every certification, every commendation, every piece of evidence that I was more than just a nurse who was good at emotional support. James noticed the change immediately when we worked a shift together. "You seem different," he said during our lunch break in the hospital cafeteria. "More focused." "I'm applying to the healthcare administration program at St. Vincent's," I told him. His eyes widened. "That's huge, David. That's director-level training. But isn't that program insanely competitive?" "It is, but I'm going to get in." He studied my face, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think you will. About time you stopped holding yourself back." The words hit harder than he probably intended. Holding myself back. That's exactly what I'd been doing, and I hadn't even realized it until Rachel made it brutally clear that my sacrifice meant nothing to her. I submitted my application on the deadline day, then tried not to obsess over it. But every time I checked my email, every time my phone buzzed, my heart rate spiked. This wasn't just about career advancement anymore. It was about proving something to Rachel and to myself. 6 weeks later, I was in the middle of treating a car accident victim in the emergency room when Dr. Hayes pulled me aside. Her expression was carefully neutral, which could mean anything. "My office. When you're done with that patient," she said. I finished stabilizing the patient, my mind racing through possibilities. Had I made a mistake? Was there a complaint? Or was this about the application? When I entered her office 20 minutes later, she was sitting behind her desk with a folder in front of her. "Close the door, David." I obeyed, my palms suddenly sweaty. She looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I've been director of this emergency department for 15 years. In that time, I've written dozens of letters of recommendation for various programs and positions." My heart sank. This sounded like the beginning of a rejection speech. "Yours was the easiest letter I've ever written," she continued, "because everything I said about your capabilities, your dedication, and your potential for leadership was absolutely true. I've watched you handle crisis situations with more composure than some of our attending physicians. I've seen you coordinate care for multiple critical patients simultaneously while teaching new nurses and keeping families informed. You have a gift for seeing the big picture while managing the details." She slid the folder across her desk to me. "St. Vincent's agrees with my assessment. Congratulations, David. You've been accepted into their healthcare administration program with a full scholarship." The words took a moment to process. Accepted. Full scholarship. I opened the folder with shaking hands and saw the official letter, my name at the top, the word congratulations in bold. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice rough with emotion. "Dr. Hayes, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll make the most of this opportunity," she replied, standing up to shake my hand. "Say you'll remember that being a good nurse doesn't mean you can't also be an excellent administrator. And say you'll come back here someday and show us what you've learned." I left her office in a daze, clutching that folder like it was made of gold. James found me in the break room, staring at the acceptance letter for the 10th time. "You got in?" he said, reading my expression. "I got in," I repeated, and suddenly I was laughing and crying at the same time. All the emotions I'd been holding back since the divorce flooding out at once. That night, I called my parents in Ohio. My mother answered on the second ring. "David, honey, we've been so worried about you since Rachel left." "I'm okay, Mom," I said, and I meant it for the first time in weeks. "Actually, I'm better than okay. I have news." I told them about the program, about the scholarship, about the opportunity to completely redirect my career. My father, a retired factory foreman who'd always encouraged education, was thrilled. "That's my boy," he said when he took the phone from my mother. "I always knew you had it in you. Rachel leaving you might be the best thing that ever happened to your career." His words stung a little, even though I knew he didn't mean them cruelly. But there was truth in them. If Rachel hadn't left, I would still be working double shifts to support her residency, putting my own advancement on hold indefinitely. The program started 3 weeks later. I reduced my hours in the emergency department to part-time and threw myself into studying hospital operations, healthcare finance, regulatory compliance, and leadership management. The coursework was intense, but I'd spent 6 years watching Rachel study for medical school. I knew how to buckle down and absorb information, but what really set the program apart was the practical component. Every student was assigned to shadow a different hospital administrator, learning the day-to-day realities of running a medical facility. I was paired with Eleanor Russo, the chief operating officer of St. Vincent's main campus. Eleanor was 58 years old, with silver hair, sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense approach to hospital management. She'd started as a nurse 30 years ago, worked her way up through administration, and now oversaw operations for a hospital system that served over 500,000 patients annually. "You have a nursing background," she said during our first meeting. "That's good. The best administrators understand patient care from the ground up, but you'll need to learn to think bigger than individual patients. You need to see systems, patterns, efficiency metrics, resource allocation." She wasn't kidding. Within weeks, I was sitting in budget meetings, analyzing patient flow data, reviewing staffing models, and learning how decisions made in administrative offices directly impacted care delivery on hospital floors. It was fascinating and overwhelming in equal measure. Eleanor pushed me hard. She'd give me problems to solve, scenarios to analyze, then critique my solutions with brutal honesty. "Wrong approach," she'd say, crossing out my carefully prepared proposal. "You're thinking like a nurse, not like an administrator. Try again." But slowly something clicked. I started seeing the hospital as an interconnected organism, each department affecting the others, every decision creating ripples throughout the system. I learned to balance patient care quality with financial sustainability, to advocate for nursing staff while understanding budgetary constraints, to implement changes that improved efficiency without sacrificing safety. 6 months into the program, Eleanor pulled me aside after a particularly challenging meeting about emergency department oversight. overcrowding. You've got it now, she said. I can see it in how you approached that problem. You didn't just propose solutions. You anticipated the ripple effects and addressed them proactively. That's the kind of thinking that separates good administrators from great ones. Her approval meant more than she probably knew. For the first time since the divorce, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. I heard about Rachel occasionally through the medical community grapevine. She'd started her cardiology residency at Presbyterian Hospital. She and Dr. Harrison were apparently seen together at various medical conferences and hospital functions. Someone mentioned they'd gotten engaged, though I never saw an official announcement. Each time I heard her name, there was a small sting, but it faded quickly. I was too busy building my own future to dwell on our past. The pain of betrayal had transformed into fuel for my ambition. James met me for dinner one evening, about 8 months into my program. We sat at a corner booth in our usual place, a diner near the hospital that served decent burgers and excellent coffee. You look different, he said, studying me across the table, confident, like you finally figured something out. Maybe I did, I replied. Rachel told me I didn't have the analytical mind for advancement. She said I was good at the emotional support aspect of nursing but couldn't handle the intellectual demands of higher-level medicine. That's bullshit, and you know it. I do now, but for a long time I believed her. Or at least, I let her words define what I thought I was capable of. The divorce forced me to reevaluate everything. James nodded, taking a bite of his burger. So what's next? After you finish the program? Eleanor has been hinting at a position, I admitted. St. Vincent's is opening a new ambulatory care center next year. They need someone to oversee operations, someone who understands both clinical care and administrative management. She thinks I'd be perfect for it. That would be amazing, David. Director-level position right out of the program? Assistant director, technically. But it's a foot in the door, and from there, who knows? What I didn't tell James was the larger plan forming in my mind. St. Vincent's hospital system was expanding rapidly, acquiring smaller hospitals and integrating them into their network. Within 5 years, Eleanor had told me, they planned to become the dominant healthcare provider in the region. That kind of growth created opportunities for people who understood both the clinical and business sides of medicine. People exactly like me. By the end of my first year in the program, I'd completed my coursework with top marks and proven myself invaluable to Eleanor. She'd started including me in strategic planning meetings, asking for my input on major decisions, treating me less like a student and more like a junior colleague. You have a gift for this, she told me during my final evaluation. Some people study hospital administration and never quite grasp the human element. They see numbers and metrics but forget there are patients and staff behind every data point. You understand both sides. That's rare and valuable. She offered me the assistant director position at the new ambulatory care center officially that same day. I accepted without hesitation. The second year of my program focused on my practical work at the new facility. I helped design patient flow systems, hired and trained staff, implemented electronic health records, and coordinated with insurance providers. The center opened 6 months later to great success, serving 200 patients daily within the first month. Eleanor watched my work with approval. You've exceeded every expectation, she said during our quarterly review. I'm recommending you for early promotion to full director once you complete the program. I graduated from the healthcare administration program 18 months after starting, at the top of my class. The ceremony was small but meaningful. My parents flew in from Ohio. James was there, along with several colleagues from the emergency department who'd supported me throughout the journey. Dr. Hayes gave a speech about the importance of nurses advancing into leadership roles. I looked out at the audience and felt genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished. This achievement was entirely mine, built on my own merit and hard work, not shadowed by someone else's success or diminished by someone else's condescension. That night, I checked my phone and saw a Facebook notification. Rachel had posted a photo from a medical conference, standing beside Dr. Harrison in formal attire. The caption read, "Another amazing evening with the best cardiology department in the state. So grateful for my career and the people who support my growth." I looked at the photo for a long moment, then closed the app. Her life, her choices, her path. I was building my own. 6 months after graduation, Eleanor called me into her office with an expression I recognized as significant news. "The board has approved a major expansion," she said. "We're acquiring Memorial Hospital downtown. It's been struggling financially, but it has a strong cardiology department and an excellent location. We want to integrate it into the St. Vincent's system and turn it around." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "We need someone to oversee that integration, someone who understands clinical operations, financial management, and how to rebuild a struggling facility, someone who can handle the political dynamics of merging two different hospital cultures." My heart started beating faster. "You're offering me the position? Chief Operating Officer of Memorial Hospital, reporting directly to me. It's a huge responsibility, David. The hospital is losing money, staff morale is low, and there are significant quality issues that need addressing. But if anyone can turn it around, I think it's you." This was it. This was the opportunity that could define my entire career. COO of a major hospital at 32 years old, just 2 years after starting the administration program. "I accept," I said without hesitation. Eleanor smiled. "I thought you might. Your official start date is in 3 weeks. Use that time to review Memorial's financials and operations reports. It's going to be challenging, but I have complete faith in you." I spent those 3 weeks preparing obsessively. I studied Memorial Hospital's budget, analyzed their patient satisfaction scores, reviewed their staffing models, and researched their competition. The hospital was indeed struggling, hemorrhaging money through operational inefficiencies and losing patients to newer, more modern modern facilities, but I could see the potential. The location was prime, right in the heart of the medical district. The cardiology department, despite the hospital's overall struggles, had an excellent reputation. The bone structure was solid. It just needed new management and a strategic vision. My first day as COO of Memorial Hospital was exactly 2 years and 3 months after Rachel had handed me divorce papers at that restaurant. I drove to the hospital early that morning, parked in the space marked Chief Operating Officer, and stood for a moment looking up at the building. This was mine, my achievement, my responsibility, my opportunity to prove what I was capable of. I walked through those doors ready to face whatever challenges awaited, armed with everything I'd learned and determined to transform this struggling hospital into something remarkable. What I didn't know as I settled into my new office that morning was that my path and Rachel's were about to collide in a way neither of us could have anticipated. The wheels of consequence were already turning, set in motion by decisions made long before I ever walked through Memorial Hospital's doors. But that revelation was still 3 months away, and I had a hospital to save. Memorial Hospital was worse than the reports suggested. My first week as COO revealed problems layered upon problems. The emergency department had a 4-hour average wait time. The operating rooms ran at 60% capacity due to scheduling inefficiencies. Staff turnover was astronomical, with nurses and technicians leaving for competitors at twice the industry average. Patient satisfaction scores were in the bottom 10% national, but the most critical issue was financial. The hospital was losing nearly $2 million per quarter, bleeding money through wasteful processes, outdated technology, and poor resource management. If we didn't turn things around within 18 months, St. Vincent's would have to consider closing departments or selling the facility entirely. I assembled my leadership team that first week. Department heads, nurse managers, financial officers, all gathered in the main conference room looking skeptical about the young new COO who'd been brought in to fix their broken hospital. I know what you're thinking, I said, standing at the head of the table. You're wondering who this person is, who thinks he can solve problems you've been dealing with for years. You're right to be skeptical, but I'm not here to lecture you or impose solutions from above. I'm here to listen, to understand what's actually happening on the ground, and to work with you to make this hospital what it should be. I spent the next month doing exactly that. I walked every floor, talked to every department. I shadowed nurses during their shifts, observed surgeries, sat in on patient consultations. I reviewed every process, every procedure, every system that kept the hospital running, and slowly, patterns emerged. The problems weren't random, they were systemic. The hospital had been managed by administrators who'd never worked in clinical settings, making decisions that looked good on paper but created chaos in practice. Nurses were drowning in paperwork instead of caring for patients. Doctors spent hours fighting with outdated electronic health records. Resources were allocated based on tradition rather than actual need. I started implementing changes carefully, strategically. First, I reorganized the nursing schedules to reduce overtime costs while improving patient coverage. Then I renegotiated contracts with medical suppliers, cutting costs by 30% without sacrificing quality. I brought in new technology to streamline patient intake and reduce emergency department wait times. Each change met resistance initially. People don't like disruption, even when the status quo is killing them. But I'd learned from Eleanor to lead by example. I worked alongside the staff, demonstrated that the changes worked, and slowly earned their trust. Sarah Chen, the director of nursing, became one of my strongest allies. She was 45 years old, had been with Memorial for 20 years, and had watched the hospital's decline with increasing frustration. You actually listen, she told me one evening as we reviewed staffing models in my office. The previous administrators would issue orders without understanding how they impact patient care. You ask questions, you want to know why things work the way they do. That's because I was a nurse, I said. I know what it's like to be on the floor, dealing with the consequences of administrative decisions. She studied me curiously. Why did you leave bedside nursing? You're good at this management stuff, but I get the feeling there's a story there. I told her about Rachel, about the divorce, about being told I didn't have the analytical mind for advancement. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from sympathy to anger. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, she said when I finished. You've transformed this hospital's operations in 3 months. You see patterns and solutions that people with decades of administrative experience miss. Your ex-wife was an idiot. I laughed despite myself. She made her choice based on what she valued. I'm making mine based on proving her wrong. Well, you're doing a damn good job of it. By month 4, the changes were showing results. Emergency department wait times dropped to 90 minutes. Operating room utilization increased to 85%. Staff turnover decreased by 40% as nurses and technicians realized their concerns were finally being heard and addressed. Patient satisfaction scores began climbing. Eleanor visited regularly to review progress. During one meeting, she looked at the latest financial reports with obvious satisfaction. You've cut the quarterly losses in half already. If you maintain this trajectory, Memorial will be profitable within a year. That's the plan, I said. But we need to do more than just stop losing money. We need to become competitive, to give patients a reason to choose us over the newer hospitals. What do you have in mind? I pulled out a proposal I'd been developing for weeks. Memorial's cardiology department is strong, but it's been held back by lack of resources and support. If we invest in expanding cardiology, upgrade the equipment, recruit top talent, we could make this hospital the regional leader in cardiac care. It would differentiate us from competitors and create a reputation that draws patients specifically for our expertise. Eleanor studied the proposal carefully. The investment would be substantial, several $millions in new equipment, facility renovations, and recruitment costs, but the potential return was significant, both financially financially and in terms of the hospital's reputation. The board will need convincing, she said finally. But I think you're right. This could be the key to Memorial's turnaround. Prepare a detailed presentation. I'll schedule a meeting with the board of directors for next month. I spent the next 4 weeks building the most comprehensive proposal of my career. Financial projections, competitive analysis, recruitment strategies, timeline for implementation. I researched the best cardiologists in the region, identified the equipment we'd need, designed the renovations required to create a state-of-the-art cardiac center. The board presentation was in a downtown conference room. 12 directors in expensive suits sitting around a mahogany table. I stood at the front with my slides and my data, knowing this was a make-or-break moment. I presented for 45 minutes, walking them through every aspect of the proposal: the initial investment, the expected return, the competitive advantage, the impact on Memorial's reputation. I showed them patient demographic data, proof that demand for cardiac services was growing. I demonstrated how the cardiology expansion would attract not just cardiac patients, but also bring in referrals for other services. When I finished, the questions came fast and hard. How would we recruit top cardiologists? What if the investment didn't generate expected returns? Why cardiology specifically instead of other specialties? I answered each question with data and logic, drawing on everything I'd learned about hospital operations and strategic planning. By the end of the 90-minute meeting, I could see several directors nodding in agreement. The board chair, a silver-haired man named Robert Chen, spoke last. "This is ambitious, Mr. Mitchell. Very ambitious. But your track record at Memorial has been impressive so far. The board will vote on this proposal next week. I'll be recommending approval." I left that meeting exhausted but hopeful. A week later, Eleanor called with news. The board had approved the cardiology expansion with a budget of $3.5 million. I had 18 months to make it successful. The recruitment process began immediately. We needed a department head, additional cardiologists, specialized nurses, and technicians. I worked with Sarah Chen to design job postings that would attract top talent, emphasizing not just salary, but the opportunity to build something from the ground up. Applications came in from across the country. I reviewed hundreds of CVs, conducted dozens of interviews, looking for people who had both the clinical expertise and the vision to create something exceptional. That's when I saw her application. Dr. Rachel Mitchell, cardiologist, currently completing her residency at Presbyterian Hospital, seeking an attending physician position. I stared at her name on the screen, my heart rate spiking. 3 years since the divorce, and here she was, applying for a position at my hospital. The hospital where I was COO, where I would be conducting final interviews, where I would have the power to approve or reject her application. The irony was almost too perfect. I forwarded her application to the Cardiology Recruitment Committee without comment, treating it like any other submission. They would do the initial screening based on qualifications alone. If she made it through to final interviews, I would deal with that situation when it arose. 2 weeks later, the committee chair, Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, came to my office with a short list of candidates for the attending positions. Rachel's name was third on the list. "She has an excellent CV," Dr. Morrison said. "Strong recommendations from her residency program, published research, good patient outcomes. There's some concern about her interpersonal skills based on some vague comments in her letters of recommendation, but her clinical abilities are solid. Schedule her for an interview," I said, keeping my voice neutral, along with the other finalists. Dr. Morrison nodded and left, not knowing the history between myself and one of her candidates. As far as anyone at Memorial knew, I was David Mitchell, 32-year-old COO who'd turned the hospital around in record time. My personal life, my divorce, my connection to Dr. Rachel Mitchell, none of that was common knowledge. The interview was scheduled for 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning. I marked it on my calendar, then tried to focus on the dozens of other pressing issues requiring my attention. But as the date approached, I found my thoughts returning constantly to what would happen when Rachel walked into that conference room and saw me sitting at the head of the table. Would she recognize my name on the interview panel? Probably not. I'd been introduced to candidates as David Mitchell, COO, without any personal details, and even if she'd heard my name, she might not connect it to her ex-husband. After all, in her mind, I was still somewhere working as a nurse, far beneath her level of professional concern. James called me the night before the interview. "I heard through the grapevine that Rachel applied to Memorial," he said without preamble. "Please tell me you're not the one interviewing her." "I'm on the interview panel," I confirmed. "David, that's insane. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to treat her application exactly like every other candidate. If she's qualified, she'll be considered. If she's not, she won't be." "You're a better person than I am," James said. "After what she did to you, I'd reject her application so fast her head would spin." "Revenge would be satisfying for about 5 minutes," I replied, "but it would also compromise my integrity and potentially hurt the hospital if she's actually the best candidate for the position." What I didn't tell James was that I had something better than revenge. I had success. I had proof that every dismissive thing Rachel had said about my capabilities was wrong, and I was about to demonstrate that proof in the most undeniable way possible. The morning of the interview, I dressed carefully in my best suit. I reviewed Rachel's application one final time, making notes on her qualifications, her experience, her published research. By the time I walked into the conference room where the interview would take place, I was completely calm. Dr. Morrison was already there, along with Sarah Chen representing nursing administration and Dr. Thomas Walsh, our interim cardiology department head. We made small talk while waiting for the candidate to arrive, reviewing the questions we prepared. At exactly 9 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Dr. Morrison called. The door opened, and Rachel walked in. She looked polished and professional in a navy suit, her hair pulled back in a neat bun, carrying a leather portfolio. She smiled at the panel, confident and composed. composed, ready to impress the people who would decide her future. Then her eyes landed on me, sitting at the center of the table with David Mitchell, Chief Operating Officer, on the nameplate in front of me. The color drained from her face, her confident smile froze, then crumbled. The portfolio in her hand slipped slightly before she caught it. For a moment, she just stood there in the doorway, staring at me like I was a ghost. Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Morrison said pleasantly, not noticing Rachel's reaction. Please, have a seat. Let's begin your interview. Rachel moved mechanically to the empty chair facing the panel, her eyes never leaving my face. She sat down slowly, clearly trying to process what she was seeing. I smiled at her politely, professionally, with no hint of the satisfaction burning in my chest. Good morning, Dr. Mitchell. Thank you for your interest in Memorial Hospital. Before we begin, let me introduce the panel. I'm David Mitchell, Chief Operating Officer. To my left is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, Chair of our Cardiology Recruitment Committee. Next to her is Sarah Chen, our Director of Nursing. And on my right is Dr. Thomas Walsh, Interim Head of our Cardiology Department. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she placed her portfolio on the table. She opened her mouth, closed it, then managed, "It's nice to meet you all." Her eyes kept darting back to me, searching for something, probably trying to understand how the nurse she'd divorced 3 years ago was now the COO of a major hospital. The nurse she'd said lacked the analytical mind for advancement. The husband she'd dismissed as incapable of matching her professional status. "Let's start with your background," Dr. Morrison said, consulting her notes. "You completed your residency at Presbyterian Hospital under Dr. Marcus Harrison's supervision. Can you tell us about your experience there?" Rachel struggled to focus, her usual polished interview demeanor completely shattered. Yes, I completed a 3-year cardiology residency. I worked primarily in interventional cardiology, assisted with over 200 cardiac catheterizations, participated in research on cardiac stent efficacy." Her voice was shaky, uncertain. This was not the confident doctor who'd handed me divorce papers and told me I wasn't on her level. This was someone completely thrown off balance, trying desperately to regain composure while facing the man she'd dismissed, now sitting in judgment of her career. Dr. Walsh asked a technical question about a procedure, and Rachel answered adequately, but without the confidence I'd seen in her other materials. Sarah Chen asked about her approach to working with nursing staff, and Rachel's answer was generic, textbook. Throughout the interview, I said very little, just watched her squirm under the weight of her own past actions coming back to haunt her. When I did ask questions, I kept them purely professional, about her research, her clinical experience, her vision for developing the cardiology department. But every time I spoke, Rachel flinched slightly, as if my words carried more weight than their surface meaning, which they did. Every professional question was an unspoken reminder. "You said I couldn't do this, yet here I am, in a position to decide your future." The interview lasted 45 minutes, the standard length for all candidates. When it ended, Dr. Morrison thanked Rachel for her time and told her we'd be in touch within 2 weeks after interviewing all finalists. Rachel stood on unsteady legs, gathered her portfolio, and moved toward the door. She paused there, turning back to look at me directly for the first time since the interview began. "David, could I speak with you privately?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The other panel members looked at me, surprised by the personal request. I maintained my professional demeanor. "I'm afraid I have another meeting in 10 minutes, Dr. Mitchell. If you have questions about the position or Memorial Hospital's cardiology expansion, I'd be happy to direct you to our Human Resources Department." It was a polite dismissal, delivered with the same clinical courtesy she'd shown me at that restaurant 3 years ago. Her face crumpled slightly, understanding the implicit message. "You don't get special treatment because of our past. You're just another candidate." She left without another word. After the door closed, Dr. Morrison turned to me. "Did you know her before today?" "We were married briefly, many years ago," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It ended before either of us began our current career paths. It won't affect my evaluation of her qualifications." Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. "Well, that was certainly awkward. For what it's worth, she seemed very rattled. Her interview was significantly weaker than her application suggested it would be." "Interviews can be stressful," I said diplomatically. "Let's see how the other candidates perform before making any decisions." Over the next week, we interviewed 5 more candidates for the attending physician positions. 2 were excellent, bringing strong credentials and impressive interviews. 1 was mediocre. 2 fell somewhere in between. Rachel's interview, objectively speaking, was in the bottom half. Her credentials were solid, but her performance during the interview revealed some concerning gaps. Her answers about collaboration with nursing staff were vague. Her vision for developing the cardiology program was generic. Most tellingly, several of her references, when we called them directly, gave lukewarm responses about her interpersonal skills. "Clinically competent," one reference said carefully, "but challenging to work with. Very focused on her own advancement, sometimes at the expense of team dynamics." Another reference was more direct. "Dr. Mitchell is skilled at cardiac procedures, but she's burned bridges with nursing staff and alienated colleagues. I'm not sure she's ready for an attending position that requires collaborative leadership." The recruitment committee met to discuss the candidates. Rachel's name came up third in our discussion. "Strong on paper," Dr. Morrison summarized. "Weak interview, concerning references regarding interpersonal skills. I'm not convinced she's the right fit for what we're trying to build here." "I agree," Dr. Walsh said. "We need someone who can work collaboratively with the nursing staff and build positive relationships with referring physicians. The feedback suggests Dr. Mitchell has struggled with that during her residency." Sarah Chen glanced at me, clearly aware of the personal history, waiting to see how I would respond. This was the moment where I could push for Rachel's rejection based on our past, or I could stay objective. "I think we need to consider the broader picture," I said carefully. "We're building a new cardiology program from the ground up. That requires not just clinical skill, but the ability to collaborate, to build teams, to represent the hospital positively to the community. Based on the interview and reference checks, I don't think Dr. Mitchell demonstrates the full skill set we need for this particular position at this particular time. It was a fair assessment, based purely on professional criteria, but it was also the final nail in Rachel's application. The committee voted. Of the 6 attending physician positions available, Rachel was not offered one. We extended offers to the 5 candidates who demonstrated both clinical excellence and strong interpersonal skills. I wrote the rejection email myself, keeping it professional and cordial. Thank you for your interest in Memorial Hospital's cardiology program. After careful consideration of all candidates, we have decided to move forward with other applicants whose qualifications more closely match our current needs. We wish you success in your career endeavors. I hit send and sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. 3 years ago, Rachel had dismissed me as intellectually inferior, incapable of advancement, someone who would hold back her career success. Today, I had objectively evaluated her application and found her lacking the qualities we needed. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about revenge, it was about validation. Proof that her assessment of me had been completely wrong, that I was capable of far more than she'd ever given me credit for. Proof that success isn't determined by someone else's opinion of your worth, but by your own determination to prove them wrong. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. David, please, I need to talk to you. This is important. Rachel. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. We had nothing to discuss. Our conversation had ended 3 years ago at that restaurant table. Everything that needed to be said had been said then. Now it was my turn to walk away without looking back. The cardiology expansion launched 3 months after the interviews. We'd recruited an exceptional team, 5 attending physicians with impeccable credentials and strong collaborative skills, along with specialized nurses and technicians. The renovated cardiac center included state-of-the-art catheterization labs, advanced imaging equipment, and private recovery rooms designed with patient comfort in mind. The grand opening was covered by local media. I stood beside Eleanor Russo as we cut the ribbon, cameras flashing, reporters asking questions about Memorial's transformation. In 18 months, we'd gone from a failing hospital losing millions quarterly to a profitable, growing facility with a reputation for excellence in cardiac care. This is your success, Eleanor told me privately after the ceremony. You saw the potential when others saw only problems. The board is extremely impressed, David. They're already discussing your future with the organization. I knew what she meant. Within St. Vincent's hospital system, success like mine opened doors to higher positions. Regional director, vice president of operations, potentially, someday, system-wide leadership. At 33 years old, I'd already surpassed most people's lifetime career achievements. That evening, I was working late in my office, reviewing patient satisfaction data from the new cardiac center's first week, when my assistant knocked on the door. Jennifer was a capable woman in her 50s who'd been with Memorial for decades and had become invaluable in helping me navigate hospital politics. There's someone here to see you, she said, her expression uncertain. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent. A Dr. Rachel Mitchell? I set down the papers I'd been reading, my jaw tightening. Tell her I'm not available. I did. She said she'd wait as long as necessary. She's been in the lobby for 2 hours already. I considered having security escort her out, but that seemed unnecessarily dramatic. Better to deal with this directly and finally send her in. But Jennifer, if I buzz you in 10 minutes, come in and tell me I have an urgent call. Understood. Rachel entered my office moments later, looking significantly different from the polished professional who'd interviewed months ago. Her hair was pulled back carelessly, her suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She clutched her purse with white-knuckled hands. Thank you for seeing me, she said, her voice hoarse. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, remaining standing myself. You have 10 minutes. What do you want, Rachel? She sat down heavily, looking around my spacious office with its view of the city skyline, the framed degrees on my wall, the evidence of my success surrounding her. I didn't know, she began. When I applied here, I had no idea you were the COO. I hadn't kept track of where you'd gone after the divorce. Clearly, you assumed I was still working as a nurse somewhere beneath your notice. She flinched at the accuracy of my assessment. I was wrong about you, about so many things. You were. Is that all you came to say? No. She took a shaky breath. Things have fallen apart, David. Everything I thought I was building has collapsed. I need your help. I sat down now, leaning back in my chair, studying her with detached curiosity. Explain. The story came out in fragments, her carefully constructed facade crumbling with each confession. Her relationship with Dr. Marcus Harrison had deteriorated rapidly after their engagement. His research partnership with her had been contingent on their personal relationship, and when that soured, so did her access to his professional network. He was using me, she admitted bitterly, for ideas, for research assistance, for co-authorship on papers where I did most of the work. When I pushed back, when I demanded equal credit, he became hostile. He started sabotaging my residency, giving me poor evaluations, excluding me from important procedures. And your response? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I filed complaints with the residency program director. It turned into a he said, she said situation. Marcus is a department head with 20 years of reputation. I'm a resident. Guess who they believe? She paused, swallowing hard. My contract wasn't renewed. Presbyterian Hospital terminated my residency 6 months before completion. No other program would accept me with that mark on my record. Marcus made sure of that. He has connections everywhere in the cardiology world. I processed this information without sympathy. So you applied here hoping to salvage your career. I applied to 30 hospitals, David. Memorial was one of the few that even granted me an interview. Most places won't touch me now, not with whispers about conflicts with attending physicians and incomplete residency. Those whispers are accurate, from what I understand. Your references indicated persistent problems with collaborative work and interpersonal relationships. Her face reddened. I was defending my work, my contributions. Marcus took credit for my research, and when I objected, I was labeled difficult. Perhaps the pattern your references described predated your relationship with Harrison. Perhaps you've consistently struggled to work effectively with colleagues because you view them as competition rather than collaborators. The words hit their mark. Rachel looked down at her hands, unable to meet my eyes. The rejection from Memorial was the final blow. She continued quietly. Without completing my residency, I can't get board certified. I can't practice as an attending physician. The best I can do is medical education positions or research assistant roles, both of which pay a fraction of what I expected to earn. And your financial situation? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. I have student loans from medical school, over $300,000. I've been living beyond my means, thinking my future income would make it manageable. Now I'm drowning in debt with no clear path forward. She finally looked up at me, her eyes desperate. I know I have no right to ask this. I know what I did to you was unforgivable, but I'm begging you, David. Give me another chance. Hire me in some capacity. Anything. Let me complete my training here. Prove myself. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at city lights. Behind me, I could hear Rachel's ragged breathing as she waited for my response. Do you remember what you said to me at that restaurant? I asked, without turning around. You said I didn't have the analytical mind for advancement. You said I was good at emotional support but couldn't handle intellectual demands. You told me I would hold back your career. I was wrong, she whispered. Yes, you were. But more than being wrong, Rachel, you were cruel. You didn't just leave me. You tried to convince me I was incapable of being anything more than what I was. You wanted me to believe I was inferior, that my limitations justified your betrayal. I turned to face her. For 8 years, I supported your dreams. I worked double shifts. I sacrificed my own advancement. I believed in you when you doubted yourself. And the moment you achieved your goal, you discarded me like I was disposable. Tears were streaming down her face now. I'm so sorry. I was arrogant, selfish, blind to everything you'd done for me. I thought status and credentials were what mattered. I thought Marcus represented success because he had publications and prestige. I was wrong about all of it. Your apology is noted, but it changes nothing. David, please. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to work, to rebuild my career. I'll take any position, anything that lets me use my medical training. I walked back to my desk and sat down, pulling up her application file on my computer. Your clinical skills are adequate. Your knowledge base is solid, but every reference we checked raised concerns about your ability to function as part of a team. You burned bridges at Presbyterian, alienated colleagues, prioritized personal advancement over collaborative success. I've learned from that, she insisted. The consequences of my choices have taught me what really matters. Have they? Or are you simply desperate and willing to say anything to get what you want? The harsh words made her shrink back in her chair, but I continued relentlessly. Memorial Hospital's success is built on collaboration, on people checking their egos at the door, and focusing on patient care above personal advancement. The culture I've created here values integrity, teamwork, and mutual respect. Based on your track record, you represent the opposite of those values. I can change. I want to change. I studied her for a long moment. This woman who'd once held my heart and then crushed it without hesitation. Part of me wanted to help her, not out of lingering affection, but from basic human decency. But a larger part recognized that doing so would compromise everything I built. I can't hire you, Rachel. Not because of our personal history, though that's certainly a factor, but because objectively, based on your professional record, you're not the right fit for Memorial Hospital. You need to rebuild your reputation, demonstrate consistent collaborative success, and complete your training. None of that can happen here. Her face crumpled. Then what am I supposed to do? No one will hire me. My career is over before it really began. That's not my problem to solve, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. You made choices, Rachel. You chose to use me and discard me. You chose to burn bridges with colleagues. You chose to prioritize status over substance. Now you're experiencing the natural consequences of those choices. So this is revenge? Punishing me for what I did to you? No, this is accountability. If you were the best candidate for a position here, I would hire you despite our history. But you're not. Your qualifications don't match our needs. Your references raise serious concerns. And your track record suggests you haven't learned the most important lessons about medicine: humility, collaboration, and respect for everyone, regardless of their position. I stood up, signaling the conversation was ending. I genuinely hope you find a path forward, Rachel. I hope you learn from these experiences and become the physician you're capable of being. But that journey can't happen at Memorial Hospital. She rose slowly, defeat written across every line of her body. I destroyed the best thing I ever had when I left you. I know that now. I just wish I'd realized it before I threw away everything else too. Realizing it is a start, I said, but understanding your mistakes isn't the same as fixing them. That requires consistent action over time, demonstrating change through behavior, not just words. Rachel walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. You've become everything I said you couldn't be. You proved me completely wrong. I hope that brings you some satisfaction. It does, but not because I defeated you, Rachel, because I finally stopped letting your opinion of me define what I thought I could achieve. She left without another word, the door closing quietly behind her. I stood at the window again, watching her small figure exit the building and disappear into the parking lot. Jennifer knocked a minute later. Is everything all right? Yes. Dr. Mitchell won't be returning. If she tries to schedule another appointment, tell her I'm not available. Understood. There's actually actually something else I need to discuss with you. We've received several inquiries from other hospitals about your cardiology expansion model. They want to know if you'd be willing to consult on similar projects. I turned away from the window, pushing thoughts of Rachel aside and focusing on what mattered, the future I was building, one decision at a time. Set up preliminary meetings. Let's see what they're proposing. Over the next 2 months, Memorial Hospital's cardiology center exceeded every projection. Patient volume increased by 40%. Satisfaction scores were in the top 5% nationally. Revenue from cardiac services alone covered the entire investment within 18 months, 2 years ahead of schedule. Eleanor called me to her office at St. Vincent's headquarters on a Tuesday afternoon. The board of directors would like to meet with you, she said, her expression carefully neutral. Tomorrow at 10. They have a proposal to discuss. What kind of proposal? The kind that comes with a significant promotion, but I'll let them explain the details. The board meeting the next day was in the same conference room where I'd presented the cardiology expansion proposal years earlier. The same 12 directors sat around the mahogany table, but this time their expressions were uniformly positive. Robert Chen, the board chair, stood to shake my hand. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming. I'll get straight to the point. Your performance at Memorial Hospital has been exceptional. You've turned around a failing facility, implemented successful expansions, and demonstrated leadership capabilities that frankly exceed what we expected from someone your age. Thank you. I've had excellent support from Eleanor and the team. Modesty noted, but we're not here to discuss your team. We're here to discuss your future. He gestured for me to sit. St. Vincent's is acquiring 2 more hospitals in the region over the next 18 months. We need someone to oversee both acquisitions and integrations, someone who understands the clinical and business sides of hospital operations. We want you to become our vice president of hospital operations, reporting directly to our CEO, overseeing all 5 hospitals in our system. The offer was staggering. VP of operations at 33 years old, responsible for 5 hospitals serving nearly 2 million patients annually. It was the kind of position people worked 30 years to achieve. The compensation package reflects the responsibility, Robert continued, sliding a folder across the table. Base salary of $450,000 annually, plus performance bonuses, stock options, and benefits. You'd have a team of administrators reporting to you, but you'd maintain ultimate accountability for operational success across the entire system. I opened the folder and scanned the details. The offer was even more generous than he'd described, with relocation assistance, continuing education allowances, and a clear path to C-suite positions within 5 years. This is an incredible opportunity, I said carefully, but I need to understand what you expect in return. VP of operations is a position where failure is very visible. We expect what you've already demonstrated: strategic thinking, collaborative leadership, and the ability to turn struggling operations into successful ones. We're not looking for someone who maintains the status quo. We need someone who pushes for excellence while understanding the realities of healthcare delivery. Eleanor spoke up for the first time. David, I've been preparing you for this role for 3 years, even if you didn't realize it. Everything you've learned at Memorial, every challenge you've overcome, it's all been training for this level of responsibility. You're ready. The other directors nodded in agreement. These were serious business people who built and run major organizations. Their confidence in me was based on results, not sentiment. I accept, I said, my voice steady. When would you want me to start? Immediately. We'll transition you out of Memorial over the next month, bring in your replacement, and have you begin orientation into the VP role. Your first major project will be the Riverside Hospital acquisition, which closes in 60 days. We spent the next hour discussing details, expectations, and strategic priorities. By the time I left that conference room, my entire career trajectory had shifted. I wasn't just a successful hospital administrator anymore. I was a healthcare system executive with influence over operations affecting millions of patients. James met me for drinks that evening at our usual place. When I told him about the promotion, he stared at me in disbelief. VP of operations? David, that's insane. You've been in administration for less than 4 years. 3 years and 8 months, technically. You know what I mean. Most people don't reach that level until their 50s. Most people don't have the same motivation I had, I replied. Most people aren't trying to prove that their ex-wife's assessment of their capabilities was catastrophically wrong. He raised his glass in a toast to proving Rachel wrong in the most spectacular way possible. I clinked my glass against his, but my thoughts were more complex than simple vindication. Yes, I'd proven Rachel wrong. Yes, I'd achieved success she'd never anticipated. But more importantly, I'd proven something to myself, that my worth wasn't determined by someone else's judgment, that my potential wasn't limited by another person's inability to see it. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Congratulations on the promotion. You've earned every bit of it. Proud to have been part of your journey. I replied with thanks, then noticed another message below hers, an email notification from a sender I didn't recognize. I opened it curiously. David, I heard about your promotion to VP. Congratulations on your continued success. I wanted you to know that I've been accepted into a medical assistant program at a community college. It's not the career I planned, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to work in healthcare in any capacity. I've learned some hard lessons about humility and the value of every role in patient care. I hope someday I can demonstrate that I've genuinely changed. Wishing you all the best, Rachel. I read the message twice, then closed it without responding. Rachel's journey was her own now, her struggles and growth independent of me. I felt no satisfaction in her reduced circumstances, no triumph in her diminished career, just a distant hope that she would indeed learn the lessons she claimed to have discovered. But my focus was forward, not backward. Tomorrow I would begin transitioning into the most significant significant role of my career. Tomorrow I would start shaping healthcare delivery for millions of patients. Tomorrow I would prove, once again, that I was capable of far more than anyone, including myself, had once believed possible. The kid who'd been told he lacked the analytical mind for advancement had become one of the youngest healthcare executives in the region. The nurse who'd been dismissed as intellectually inferior was now responsible for 5 hospital operations. And the husband who'd been discarded for not being on the right level had climbed to heights his ex-wife would never reach. 18 months into my role as vice president of hospital operations, St. Vincent's Health System had become the dominant healthcare provider in the region. We operated 7 hospitals now, 2 more than when I'd started, serving over 3 million patients annually. Each facility showed consistent improvement in patient outcomes, financial performance, and staff satisfaction. The work was demanding beyond anything I'd experienced before. 16-hour days were routine. I traveled constantly between facilities, attended board meetings, negotiated contracts, managed crises, and strategized expansions. But unlike my years working double shifts to support Rachel's education, now every exhausting hour was building something that belonged to me. Eleanor had officially retired 6 months earlier, though she remained on the board of directors. At her retirement party, she'd pulled me aside privately. "You've exceeded every expectation I had when I first took you on as a student," she said. "I've watched a lot of administrators come and go in my career, David. You're one of the rare ones who understands that hospitals exist to serve patients, not the other way around. Don't ever lose that perspective, no matter how high you climb." I thought about her words often, especially during difficult decisions where financial pressures conflicted with patient care priorities. My nursing background gave me an advantage many healthcare executives lacked. I'd seen firsthand how administrative decisions impacted patients and staff. That perspective kept me grounded even as my responsibilities expanded. My personal life had evolved as well, though more slowly than my career. I'd dated occasionally over the past few years. Nothing serious. Nothing that distracted from my professional focus. Then I met Catherine Torres at a healthcare policy conference in Chicago. She was 32, a hospital attorney specializing in healthcare compliance, with sharp intelligence and a dry sense of humor that immediately appealed to me. We started talking during a particularly boring panel discussion about Medicare regulations, exchanged contact information, and maintained correspondence for months before our schedules aligned enough for an actual date. Catherine understood the demands of healthcare careers. She'd worked her way through law school while supporting her younger siblings after their parents died, so she recognized sacrifice and determination when she saw it. When I told her about Rachel, about the divorce and my motivation to prove myself, she listened without judgment. "Sounds like she did you a favor," Catherine said over dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant. "Not that the betrayal wasn't painful, but it forced you to stop limiting yourself to someone else's expectations. That's one way to look at it. It's the right way to look at it. The best revenge is living well, and by that standard, you've achieved spectacular revenge while also becoming genuinely successful. That's a rare combination." Our relationship developed naturally, without the intensity and urgency that had characterized my marriage to Rachel. Catherine had her own career, her own ambitions, her own identity independent of me. We supported each other's growth, rather than one person sacrificing for the other's advancement. When I introduced her to my parents during their visit to the city, my mother pulled me aside in the kitchen. "She's different from Rachel," Mom said quietly, "more grounded. She looks at you like you're an equal, not a stepping stone. She is different in every way that matters." 6 months into our relationship, Catherine accepted a position with St. Vincent's legal department, overseeing healthcare compliance across our entire system. We worked in the same organization now, though different departments with clear professional boundaries. Our colleagues knew we were together but respected our insistence on maintaining professional standards during work hours. Life had achieved a balance I hadn't thought possible. Successful career, healthy relationship, financial security, and most importantly, genuine satisfaction with what I built. The ghost of Rachel's dismissal still haunted me occasionally, but its power had faded significantly. Then came the phone call that changed everything. I was in my office on a Tuesday afternoon, reviewing quarterly performance reports, when my assistant knocked on the door. "There's a call for you on line 3. She says it's urgent and personal." A Dr. Patricia Chen? The name was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. I picked up the phone. "This is David Mitchell." "Mr. Mitchell, this is Dr. Patricia Chen. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Presbyterian Hospital. I apologize for calling unannounced, but I need to discuss a delicate matter regarding a former employee." Presbyterian Hospital, where Rachel had completed most of her residency before things fell apart. My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of matter?" "It concerns Dr. Rachel Mitchell. I understand you were previously married to her?" "We divorced 4 years ago. I haven't had contact with her in nearly 2 years." "I see. The reason I'm calling is that Dr. Mitchell has applied for readmission to our cardiology residency program. Normally, this would be an internal decision, but given the circumstances of her previous departure and the accusations she made against Dr. Harrison, our board requires additional verification." I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. "What kind of verification?" "Dr. Mitchell claims that her relationship with you, her subsequent divorce, and her behavior during her residency were influenced by personal pressures and poor judgment that she's since addressed through therapy and personal growth. She's requesting that we consider her application based on her current character and capabilities, not her past mistakes." "And you want my assessment of her current character?" "Partially. But more specifically, we want to know if the accusations she made against Dr. Harrison had any merit. She claims he manipulated her professionally and personally, taking credit for her research and sabotaging her career when she objected. Dr. Harrison naturally denies all of this. Your perspective as someone who knew her during that time period might provide clarity. This was delicate territory. On one hand, I had no obligation to help Rachel rebuild her career at the institution where she'd sabotaged it. On the other hand, if Harrison had genuinely abused his position, that was an ethical issue that transcended my personal feelings about my ex-wife. Can I ask why this matters to Presbyterian's decision? I said carefully. Because if Dr. Harrison did act inappropriately with a resident under his supervision, that's a serious violation that we need to address, regardless of Dr. Mitchell's other issues. But we need evidence beyond her word against his. You knew her during the relevant time period. Did you observe anything that might corroborate her claims? I thought back to those final months before the divorce. Rachel coming home late, constantly on her phone, talking about Harrison's research in excited tones, the expensive clothes, the designer accessories, the sudden change in her demeanor. I observed a resident who was clearly involved romantically with her attending physician, I said slowly. Whether that relationship was consensual or coercive, I couldn't say definitively, but I can tell you that Rachel frequently mentioned collaborative research projects with Dr. Harrison, and based on conversations I overheard, she did seem to be doing a significant portion of the work, while his name appeared first on publications. That aligns with what other former residents have reported, Dr. Chen said. We've been investigating Dr. Harrison for several months based on multiple complaints. Dr. Mitchell's case is one of several that show similar patterns, but we need stronger evidence before we can take action against a department head with his tenure. What exactly are you asking me to do? If you have any emails, text messages, or documentation from that time period that might provide evidence of inappropriate conduct, we'd like to review it. Additionally, if you'd be willing to provide a formal statement about what you observed, that would be helpful to our investigation. I sat in silence for a long moment. Helping Presbyterian investigate Harrison wasn't about helping Rachel. It was about addressing potential abuse of power that might be affecting other residents. That was bigger than my personal history. I'll need to review what documentation I still have, I said finally. But yes, if I find anything relevant to your investigation, I'll provide it. I'll also provide a formal statement about what I observed, with the understanding that my knowledge is limited to what I witnessed as her spouse during that period. That's all we ask. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I know this puts you in an uncomfortable position. After she hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, my mind churning. I'd deleted most communications with Rachel after the divorce, part of moving forward and letting go, but I was meticulous about backing up files. Somewhere in my archived emails, there might be messages from that period that could be relevant. I spent the next 2 hours searching through old backups, finding emails I'd forgotten existed, messages from Rachel during her residency, sent late at night from the hospital, discussing research projects. Several explicitly mentioned Harrison's demands that she complete analysis or writing while he was listed as primary author. One email in particular stood out, sent 3 months before the divorce. David, I'm exhausted. Harrison has me working on his research every night after rounds. I'm doing all the data analysis for the stent study, but he says my name will only be second author because I'm just a resident. He says this is how the game is played, that if I want to advance, I need to accept how things work. I hate it, but I don't see another option. I'd responded to that email with encouragement and support, not realizing the manipulation happening behind her words. At the time, I'd thought she was just stressed from residency demands. Now I could see it differently, a pattern of exploitation by someone in a position of power. I compiled a folder of relevant emails and wrote a detailed statement about what I'd observed. Rachel's increasingly late nights, her frequent mentions of Harrison, the gifts and expensive items she'd suddenly acquired, the way she'd talked about him with a mixture of admiration and resentment. I tried to be objective, noting what I'd seen without interpretation or judgment. When I submitted the documentation to Dr. Chen, she called me back within hours. This is very helpful, Mr. Mitchell. Combined with other evidence we've gathered, this gives us a much clearer picture of Dr. Harrison's pattern of behavior. Thank you for your cooperation. What happens now? I asked. We continue our investigation. If the evidence supports the complaints, we'll take appropriate action. As for Dr. Mitchell's application for readmission, that will be evaluated separately based on whether she's demonstrated genuine growth and rehabilitation. 2 months later, the news broke. Presbyterian Hospital announced that Dr. Marcus Harrison had been terminated following an investigation into ethical violations involving residents under his supervision. 3 former residents, including Rachel, had filed formal complaints alleging professional exploitation and inappropriate relationships. The story made regional headlines. Harrison tried to fight the termination, but the evidence against him was substantial. His medical license was suspended pending review by the state medical board. Publications where he'd claimed primary authorship were being audited to determine appropriate credit. Rachel called me the day after the news went public. Catherine was with me when the call came through, and I put it on speaker with Rachel's permission. David, I don't know how to thank you. Rachel's voice came through, emotional but controlled. Dr. Chen told me you provided documentation that helped their investigation. You had no reason to help me after everything I did to you. I didn't do it to help you, I said honestly. I did it because Harrison abusing his position was wrong, regardless of our personal history. If what happened to you also happened to other residents, that needed to be addressed. I know, but it still means something. The residency board reviewed my application, and they've offered me readmission to complete my final 6 months. It's conditional on good behavior and quarterly evaluations, but it's a chance to finish what I started. I'm glad you'll get to complete your training. There was a long pause. I've been going to therapy, David. Real therapy, not just lip service. Trying to understand why I made the choices I did. did, why I treated people the way I did. My therapist helped me see that I was so focused on external validation, on status and credentials, that I lost sight of why I wanted to be a doctor in the first place. That's important work. I hope you continue it. I will. I'm also working as a medical assistant at a community clinic while finishing my residency requirements. It's humbling being back in a support role, but it's teaching me things I should have learned years ago about respect, about teamwork, about the value of every person who contributes to patient care. Catherine caught my eye and gave me a small nod of approval. This conversation was about closure, not reconciliation. Rachel, I genuinely hope you succeed in rebuilding your career, I said. Not because I forgive you for what you did, that's still complicated, but because patients need good doctors, and if you can become the physician you're capable of being, that serves a greater good. That's more grace than I deserve, but I'll take it, and I'll try to earn it through my actions going forward. After she hung up, Catherine squeezed my hand. That was very mature of you. Maturity is easier when you're happy with your own life, I replied. 4 years ago, that conversation would have been much harder, but now, I've moved past needing validation from her, or revenge against her. Her success or failure doesn't affect me anymore. That's how you know you've really healed. 6 months later, I received an invitation to speak at a healthcare leadership conference. The topic was Non-Traditional Paths to Healthcare Administration, Lessons from the Front Lines. They wanted me to discuss my journey from nursing to executive leadership, with particular focus on how clinical experience informed administrative decisions. I accepted the invitation and spent weeks preparing a presentation that was honest about the challenges I faced, the obstacles I'd overcome, and the lessons I'd learned. I talked about the divorce without naming Rachel, framing it as a catalyst that forced me to reevaluate my potential and pursue advancement I'd been avoiding. The audience of several hundred healthcare professionals listened attentively. During the question period afterward, a young nurse raised her hand. You mentioned that someone told you that you didn't have the analytical mind for advancement, she said. How did you push past that kind of discouragement? I thought carefully about my answer. I think the key was recognizing that their assessment said more about them than it did about me. People who dismiss others' potential usually do so to make themselves feel superior or to justify their own choices, but your capabilities aren't determined by someone else's opinion. They're determined by your willingness to work, learn, and grow. Another hand went up. A middle-aged administrator. Do you ever regret the path you took, the sacrifices you made? I regret that I didn't start sooner, I answered honestly. I spent years putting someone else's dreams ahead of my own, thinking that was what love and support required. Now I understand that healthy relationships involve mutual support, not one person always sacrificing for the other. The best thing that came from my divorce was the freedom to discover what I was capable of when I wasn't limiting myself to someone else's expectations. After the conference, several attendees approached me with their own stories of being dismissed or discouraged, of being told they weren't capable of advancement. Many were nurses considering administrative paths, but held back by others' opinions or their own doubts. Your story gives me hope, one young woman said. I've been told I should be content with bedside nursing, that I don't have what it takes for leadership. But hearing how you overcame similar dismissals makes me think maybe I can too. You absolutely can, I assured her. The question isn't whether you're capable. The question is whether you're willing to work for it, and whether you're prepared to prove the doubters wrong. That evening, I called my parents to tell them about the conference. My father, now retired and battling some health issues, listened with quiet pride. Your mother and I always knew you had potential, son, he said, his voice weaker than I remembered. But even we didn't imagine you'd accomplish this much. You've made us very proud. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. That girl who left you, the doctor, she did you the biggest favor of your life, even if she didn't mean to. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things for us. His words echoed in my mind after we hung up. The divorce had been devastating at the time, a betrayal that shattered my sense of worth and security, but it had also freed me from a relationship where I'd been diminishing myself, where my value was measured by someone else's flawed metrics. Without that painful catalyst, would I have pursued the healthcare administration program? Would I have pushed myself to prove that I was capable of more? Would I have achieved the success that now defined my career? Probably not. I'd have continued working as a nurse, supporting Rachel's career, accepting her assessment of my limitations because it was easier than challenging her judgment and risking her disapproval. The following year brought more changes. Catherine and I got engaged, a decision made with calm certainty rather than passionate urgency. We understood each other's ambitions, respected each other's autonomy, and genuinely enjoyed building a life together. Our wedding was small and personal, focused on the commitment we were making rather than impressing others. James was my best man, and he gave a toast at the reception that made me laugh and cry simultaneously. David, I've known you for over a decade. I watched you support someone who didn't deserve it, get crushed by betrayal, and then rise from that devastation to become one of the most respected healthcare executives in the region. But more than your professional success, I've watched you become someone who knows his own worth and doesn't need external validation to prove it. That's the real victory. Catherine, you're marrying a man who's learned the hard way not to diminish himself for someone else's comfort. Take care of each other, support each other's dreams, and never forget that the best relationships make both people better. As Catherine and I danced our first dance as husband and wife, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the betrayal, the struggle, all of it had been necessary to become the person I was now. My phone buzzed during the reception with a text message. I almost ignored it, but the name caught my attention. Rachel, I saw the announcement of your wedding on LinkedIn. Congratulations, Dave. I mean that sincerely. I also wanted to tell you that I completed my residency last month. I passed my board certification exams and accepted a position at a county hospital serving underserved populations. It's not prestigious, but the work is meaningful, and I'm finally focusing on patient care rather than status. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove I could change. I hope you and Catherine have a wonderful life together. I showed the message to Catherine, who read it thoughtfully. How does that make you feel? Satisfied? I said after a moment's consideration. Not vindicated or triumphant, just satisfied. She found her path, I found mine, and both of us are better off than we were. That's mature of you. Well, I had a good teacher, I said, pulling her close. Someone who showed me that real partnership means supporting each other's growth, not competing for superiority. As the reception continued, I looked around at the people celebrating with us. My parents, proud and aging, but still present. James and other friends from my nursing days. Colleagues from St. Vincent's who'd become genuine friends. Catherine's family, welcoming and warm. This was my community now, built on mutual respect and authentic connection, rather than status or hierarchy. The kid who'd been told he wasn't analytical enough had become a healthcare system executive. The nurse who'd been dismissed as intellectually inferior had transformed operational systems serving millions. The husband who'd been discarded for not being on the right level had built a life defined by success, integrity, and genuine partnership. But more than any of those external achievements, I'd learned the most important lesson. My worth wasn't determined by someone else's assessment. It was determined by my own determination to prove, primarily to myself, that I was capable of far more than anyone, including me, had once believed possible. And that ultimately was the greatest victory of all. 5 years after my divorce from Rachel, I stood in the boardroom of St. Vincent's corporate headquarters, preparing for the most significant presentation of my career. At 37 years old, I'd been offered the position of Chief Executive Officer for the entire St. Vincent's hospital system, overseeing 9 hospitals, 33 ambulatory care centers, and over 15,000 employees. The outgoing CEO, Thomas Bradford, had announced his retirement 6 months earlier after 20 years of leadership. The board of directors had conducted a national search for his replacement, interviewing candidates from major healthcare systems across the country, and they'd chosen me, the former nurse who'd started in their administration program less than 7 years ago. You've earned this through results, not politics, Robert Chen told me during the final interview. You've transformed every operation you've touched, built collaborative cultures, and maintained focus on patient care while achieving financial sustainability. That's exactly what St. Vincent's needs in its next generation of leadership. The position came with immense responsibility and equally immense compensation. A base salary of $750,000 annually, performance bonuses, stock options, and benefits that reflected the weight of leading a $2 billion healthcare organization. But more than the money, it represented validation of everything I'd worked to achieve. Catherine was with me for the board presentation, where I outlined my vision for St. Vincent's future, expanding telehealth services, investing in preventive care programs, creating pathways for clinical staff to advance into leadership roles, modernizing technology infrastructure while maintaining the human element of healthcare delivery. Healthcare is changing rapidly, I told the board. The systems that thrive will be those that adapt while staying true to core values: excellent patient care, collaborative staff culture, and financial sustainability that enables continued investment in communities we serve. I believe St. Vincent's can lead that change rather than react to it. The board voted unanimously to approve my appointment. The announcement would be made publicly the following week, giving me time to prepare for the increased scrutiny and responsibility that came with being a healthcare system CEO. That evening, Catherine and I celebrated quietly at home. We'd bought a house 2 years earlier, nothing ostentatious but comfortable, with space for the family we were planning to start. She was 4 months pregnant with our first child, a daughter we'd already named Elena after the housekeeper who'd first recognized my passion for medicine. You've come a long way from that restaurant table, Catherine said as we sat on our back porch, watching the sunset. From signing divorce papers to becoming CEO of a major healthcare system, that's quite a journey. It still feels surreal sometimes, like I'll wake up and realize I'm still working double shifts to pay someone else's tuition. But you're not. You built this, David. Every step, every decision, every risk you took to prove you were capable of more than anyone gave you credit for. I thought about the path that had brought me here, the devastation of the divorce, the determination to prove Rachel wrong, the grueling hours in the administration program, the challenges at Memorial Hospital, the steady climb through progressively larger responsibilities. Each obstacle had taught me something essential about leadership, about myself, about what I was truly capable of achieving. I got an email from James today, I said. He's been accepted into the same healthcare administration program I completed. He's finally ready to pursue advancement after watching me do it. That's wonderful. Will you be his mentor? Already offered. He was there for me during my worst moments. The least I can do is support him during his growth. My phone buzzed with a message from my father. Just heard the news from your mother. CEO, we always knew you'd do great things, but this exceeds even our wildest expectations. So proud of you, son. I called him immediately, wanting to hear his voice. He'd been declining steadily over the past year, his health issues mounting despite the best medical care I could provide. When he answered, he sounded tired, but genuinely happy. David, my boy, CEO of an entire hospital system. Do you remember when you were little, you'd play doctor with your stuffed animals? Your mother used to say you had healing hands. I remember, Dad, though I never imagined it would lead here. That's because you can't see your own potential until someone forces you to look. That doctor you married, she did you a favor by leaving, even if it hurt like hell at the time. You've said that before. I think you might be right. I know I'm right. A father knows these things. He paused, breathing heavily. Listen, I need to tell tell you something. I'm proud of you, son. Not just for your career success, though that's impressive, but for who you've become. You turned pain into purpose, rejection into determination. You didn't let someone else's opinion define your limits. That takes character, real character. His words hit deeper than I expected, bringing tears to my eyes. Thanks, Dad. That means everything to me. Make sure your daughter knows her father is someone worth admiring. Teach her that her worth isn't determined by what others think, but by who she chooses to be. We talked for another hour, reminiscing about my childhood, discussing his health, sharing hopes for the future. When we finally hung up, I sat quietly for a long time, feeling the weight of his pride and the knowledge that our time together was growing shorter. The public announcement of my appointment as CEO generated significant media attention. Local news covered the story, emphasizing my rapid rise from clinical nursing to system leadership. Healthcare industry publications wrote feature articles about my approach to hospital administration. Several medical schools invited me to speak to students about non-traditional career paths in healthcare. During one interview with a healthcare journal, the reporter asked about the biggest challenge I'd faced in my career trajectory. I thought carefully about my answer. The biggest challenge was learning to believe in my own capabilities, I said. I'd been told by someone I trusted that I lacked certain qualities necessary for advancement. For years, I accepted that assessment without question. The real turning point came when circumstances forced me to test whether that assessment was accurate. I discovered it wasn't, that I was capable of far more than I'd been led to believe. But that discovery required taking risks and being willing to fail. What would you say to others facing similar doubts about their potential? I'd say that other people's opinions about your capabilities are just opinions, not facts. The only way to know what you're truly capable of is to try. Take the risks, do the work, be willing to fail, and learn from those failures. Don't let someone else's limitations become your own. The interview generated unexpected responses. I received dozens of emails from nurses, medical assistants, and other healthcare workers who'd been discouraged from pursuing advancement. Many shared stories similar to mine of being told they should be content with their current positions, that they lacked the education or intellect for leadership roles. I responded to each message personally, offering encouragement and practical advice about programs and pathways available to them. If my story could inspire even one person to pursue their potential rather than accept someone else's assessment of their limitations, then sharing it publicly had been worthwhile. 3 months into my tenure as CEO, my father passed away. He died peacefully at home, surrounded by family, having lived long enough to see his son achieve success beyond anything either of us had imagined. At his funeral, I spoke about his quiet strength, his unwavering support, and his belief in me even when I didn't believe in myself. My father taught me that character is built through adversity, I told the gathered mourners. He showed me that dignity comes not from titles or achievements, but from how you treat people regardless of their position. He believed in hard work, in integrity, in the value of every person's contribution. Those lessons shaped everything I've become. In the front row, Catherine held our daughter Elena, now 6 months old. My mother sat beside them, grieving but proud. James attended with several other friends from my nursing days, people who'd known me before the divorce, before the administration program, before the rapid ascent through healthcare leadership. After the funeral, James pulled me aside. Your dad was right about everything, especially about that divorce being the best thing that could have happened to your career. Look at you now, CEO of a major hospital system, beautiful wife, perfect daughter. You won, David. You really won. It's not about winning, I said quietly. It's about becoming who I was always capable of being. Rachel leaving just forced me to discover that sooner rather than later. Have you heard from her recently? Not in over a year. Last I heard, she's still working at that county hospital, focusing on underserved populations. She found her path. I found mine. We're both better off than we were. 6 months later, I was invited to give the keynote address at Pacific Medical School's graduation ceremony, the same school where Rachel had graduated years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood at the podium looking out at hundreds of new doctors about to begin their careers. Many of you are leaving here today with dreams of prestigious positions, impressive titles, and successful careers, I began. Those are worthy goals. But I want to challenge you to think more deeply about what success really means. I told them an abbreviated version of my story, of supporting someone through medical school, of being dismissed and divorced, of rebuilding my life and discovering capabilities I hadn't known I possessed. The person who told me I lacked the analytical mind for advancement was wrong, I said. But more importantly, I was wrong for believing them. I'd accepted someone else's assessment of my limitations without testing whether it was accurate. Don't make that mistake. Don't let anyone, including yourself, define limits to your potential without challenging those assumptions. I talked about the importance of humility, of recognizing that every person in healthcare plays a vital role regardless of their title or credentials. Some of you will become department heads and research leaders. Others will focus on direct patient care. All of those paths have equal value because they all serve the same fundamental purpose: healing people who are suffering. Never forget that, and never let professional hierarchy convince you that some roles are more important than others. After the ceremony, several graduates approached me with questions about healthcare leadership, about pursuing administrative paths, about overcoming self-doubt and external discouragement. I gave each person my card and encouraged them to reach out if they wanted guidance or mentorship. One young woman hung back until the others had left. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to thank you for your speech. I'm starting my residency next month in cardiology, and I've been feeling intimidated by some of the attending physicians who seem more focused on status and patient care. Your words reminded me why I went into medicine in the first place. Hold on to that purpose, I advised. The system will try to make you cynical, will pressure you to prioritize prioritize credentials over compassion. Resist that. Be the doctor who treats everyone with respect, who values collaboration over competition, who remembers that patients are people, not cases. As she walked away, I wondered if Rachel had been in the audience today. I'd heard she was considering fellowship opportunities after completing her residency, trying to rebuild the career she'd once derailed. Part of me hoped she'd heard the speech, understood the lessons embedded in my story without bitterness or resentment. That evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Thank you for your words today. David, I was in the audience at the graduation ceremony today. I wasn't sure whether to reach out, but your speech moved me deeply. You've built an extraordinary life and career, not despite the pain I caused you, but in many ways because of it. That's not me taking credit for your success, just acknowledging that you transformed devastation into determination in a way that few people could. I'm completing a fellowship in community cardiology, focusing on preventive care for underserved populations. It's not prestigious or high-paying, but it's meaningful work that actually helps people who need it most. I've learned too slowly and at too high a cost that status and titles don't bring satisfaction. Service does. Thank you for having the grace to help me when you had every reason not to. I'll never forget that. Wishing you, Catherine, and Elena all the happiness you deserve. Rachel." I read the email twice, then shared it with Catherine. She read it thoughtfully before looking up at me. "How do you feel about that?" "At peace," I said honestly. She found her path, I found mine. We both learned hard lessons and became better people through the process. That's the best possible outcome from what could have been just bitterness and resentment. "Are you going to respond?" I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. "No, there's nothing left to say. We've both moved forward, and that's how it should stay. The past is the past." 2 years later, St. Vincent's healthcare system had expanded to 12 hospitals under my leadership. We'd implemented innovative programs that improved patient outcomes while reducing costs. Staff satisfaction scores were at all-time highs. Our financial performance exceeded projections. Healthcare industry analysts regularly cited St. Vincent's as a model for sustainable, patient-centered care. I was invited to speak at a national healthcare leadership conference, presenting on a panel about transforming struggling hospitals into thriving institutions. During the question period, a young hospital administrator asked, "What's the most important quality for healthcare leaders?" "Humility," I answered without hesitation. "Understanding that you don't have all the answers, that the people doing the work often understand problems better than executives in boardrooms, that collaboration produces better results than hierarchy. The moment you start believing you're too important to listen to anyone else is the moment you stop being an effective leader." Another panelist, a CEO from a competing healthcare system, nodded in agreement. "David, your background as a nurse gives you perspective many healthcare executives lack. Do you think more clinical professionals should pursue administrative roles?" "Absolutely. The best healthcare leaders understand patient care from direct experience, not just data and reports. We need more nurses, more technicians, more people who've done the work advancing into positions where they can shape policy and operations. But that requires systems willing to invest in developing those leaders and individuals willing to take risks on their own potential." After the conference, I flew home to Catherine and Elena. Our daughter was 3 now, curious and energetic, with her mother's intelligence and, I like to think, my determination. Catherine had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Legal Affairs for St. Vincent's, making us one of the few executive couples in healthcare leadership. "How was the conference?" she asked as I walked through the door. "Good, productive, but I'm glad to be home." Elena ran to me and I scooped her up, feeling the weight of her small body against my chest. This was what mattered. This moment, this connection, the titles, the achievements, the validation. All of that was secondary to the life Catherine and I were building together. That night, after Elena was asleep, I sat in my home office reviewing materials for upcoming board meetings. On the shelf above my desk sat my nursing degree, my master's in healthcare administration, and various awards and recognitions I'd received over the years. But the item I valued most was a framed photo from my wedding to Catherine. Both of us laughing, genuinely happy, building something together rather than one person sacrificing for the other. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Dr. Marcus Harrison, the cardiologist who'd exploited residents, including Rachel, had permanently lost his medical license following the ethics investigation. He'd attempted several appeals, all denied based on overwhelming evidence of misconduct. His career was finished, his reputation destroyed by his own actions. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just a quiet certainty that consequences had caught up with someone who'd abused his position. Justice, when it finally arrived, wasn't always dramatic or immediate. Sometimes it was simply accurate accounting of someone's choices. Looking back on the journey from that devastating dinner at Marcello's to this moment, I could trace a clear line of growth and transformation. The pain Rachel had caused by dismissing my potential and discarding our marriage had been real and profound. But that pain had also been catalytic, forcing me to question assumptions about my own capabilities and pursue opportunities I'd been avoiding. Would I have become CEO of a major healthcare system if Rachel hadn't divorced me? Probably not. I'd have continued supporting her career, putting my own advancement on hold, accepting her assessment that I lacked the analytical mind for leadership. The divorce, as devastating as it was at the time, had freed me to discover what I was actually capable of achieving. But that didn't mean I was grateful for the betrayal, or that the ends justified her means. It simply meant I'd transformed something painful into something purposeful. I'd taken rejection and turned it into determination, dismissed potential into proven capabilities, failure into success. The real victory wasn't becoming CEO, or achieving financial security, or even proving Rachel wrong about my abilities. The real victory was learning that my worth wasn't determined by someone else's judgment. It was determined by my own choices, my own efforts, my own willingness to test the limits of what I could achieve. I'd started as a nurse who believed he wasn't capable of more. I'd become a healthcare executive leading a multi-billion-dollar organization. But more importantly, I'd become someone who understood that potential is only limited by the boundaries we accept rather than challenge. Elena would grow up knowing her father had overcome obstacles and achieved success through determination and hard work. She'd learn that other people's opinions were just opinions, not facts. She'd understand that the only real limitations were those she imposed on herself by accepting others' assessments without question. And if someday someone told her she wasn't capable of something, she'd have her father's story as proof that being underestimated can be the greatest gift anyone ever receives if you're willing to prove them wrong. What happened between Rachel and me was never really about revenge or vindication. It was about two people whose paths diverged dramatically based on choices made and consequences faced. She'd chosen status over character, credentials over integrity, personal advancement over collaborative success. Those choices had led her down one path, while my different choices had led me down another. Now, years later, both of us had learned hard lessons and found meaningful work. Both of us were serving patients and contributing to healthcare in our own ways. The difference was that I'd built my success on a foundation of integrity, collaboration, and genuine respect for every person's contribution, while she'd had to learn those lessons through painful consequences of initially rejecting them. Sometimes the person who leaves you behind is actually doing you a favor, setting you free to become who you were always meant to be. Sometimes being told you're not good enough is the push you need to discover you're actually extraordinary. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best life you could have imagined. Rachel's decision to divorce me on the day she became a doctor had felt like the end of my world. In reality, it had been the beginning of discovering my true potential. And for that unexpected gift, buried within devastating betrayal, I was finally, genuinely grateful. Not to her, but to life itself for forcing me to become more than I'd ever dared to believe I could be. Have you ever been told you weren't capable of something, only to prove them spectacularly wrong? Or watch someone who betrayed you face the consequences of their choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who's facing similar doubts about their potential. Thank you for listening to my journey. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means everything and helps us share more stories of resilience, growth, and second chances. Until next time, remember, your worth isn't determined by someone else's opinion of you.